On behalf of the Manitoba School Boards Association, it is a pleasure for me to bring greetings to you. My name is Ken Cameron and I am President of the Association. I will be serving as our MC for today's reception. We are so happy that everyone could join us today for this celebration. On January 28, 1916, an important milestone was reached by women in Manitoba. For the first time, select groups of women in our province were granted the legal right to vote. It is important that we be clear that not every woman in Manitoba became entitled to vote on that date. Indeed, several additional milestones would need to be achieved during the 20th century on the road to universal suffrage. Therefore, we celebrate January 28, 1916 today in recognition of the reality that it marked on an important beginning. It was by no means an end. Those who were not immediately granted the right to vote included Aboriginal and Indigenous women. Their right would be won years later and only into the 1960s. In this era of truth and reconciliation, it is important, therefore, that we remember. As peoples who also share in the rights and duties of our treaty commitments, we therefore seek on this occasion not only to remember, but to recognize the peoples of Treaty 1 First Nations upon whose territory and lands we are meeting. It is important that we equally recognize the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation upon which we are gathered. On this occasion, however, it is especially important that we also signal our respect through our humble regret that the road to enfranchisement for Aboriginal and Indigenous women took so long to achieve. Indeed, as will be seen during today's reception, there are important stories that must be told to understand the long journey. But at the end of that journey lies incredible hope for our shared futures. I would now like to invite Helen Robinson-Settee, Director of the Aboriginal Education Directorate, to open our reception with a special blessing.
You can remain seated. Tansiani, bonjour. I'm very honored today to bring you a blessing and to bring you a prayer for this occasion today for our women. Our women in our traditional way of life, Indigenous people, are very sacred. And women are the life givers and the caregivers of our families and in our communities. And so today, in celebrating all of these women who have started that journey for us years ago, was a very important piece of work. It wasn't easy for many of them, because many of them who worked in offices, looking for a good way for the children and the families in their communities, also had to make sacrifices, also within their homes. And so we celebrate all of these women today and all the accomplishments that they have made, and other women as well too. They represent, a certain part of their communities. But we also celebrate all other women who have been in leadership positions as trustees, and as well too those ones that are coming. I see a lot of young girls in here, some little girls, and maybe one day they too will be a trustee or leader in their community. So I'll just offer a short prayer to our Creator, and we'll say that now. Tansiani bonjour, esikwe makodunim. We thank you, Creator, for this day, for the fellowship that we have today with all these beautiful people who are here to celebrate the women who have achieved milestones within their communities, as well as this milestone that we are also celebrating for women who became and who were given a right to vote. We say miigwech, Creator, that the women here today, in their strength and their wisdom, we celebrate them, we share their accomplishment, we share their journeys. And for those ones that are coming as well too, those young people that are coming, that we will all be an example for them. And for all the leaders that are here today, we also thank you, Creator, that they are also here to celebrate as well too on this occasion. And we ask you, Creator, the ones that had to travel as well too, to be here today, ones who had to travel many miles, we ask you that you will take them back safely as well to their homes and to their home fires, their communities. And we thank you for this day today. We ask that you would take care of all of us. Miigwech.
Blessings. You have certainly helped to ensure that our celebration starts in a good place today. We're also pleased to have with us this afternoon the Honourable Greg Sellinger, Premier of the Province of Manitoba. Premier Sellinger is joined by several colleagues. The Honourable James Allen, Minister of Education, planned on attending today, but at the last minute was unable to do so. Minister of responsible for the status of women, the Honourable Carrie Irvin Ross. The Honourable Erna Braun, Minister of Labour and Immigration. I would now like to invite the Premier Sellinger to the podium for an important announcement on behalf of the government of Manitoba.
Well, let's start by making it a threesome here when it comes to Nancy. She was a school trustee in the Norwood School Division, and that was where she started. And so many of our politicians, including people like Maureen Hempel, who I see in the crowd, who was also the president of the school trustees for the whole province before she became the Minister of Education. And I do have to say, I've always felt that school trustees are underappreciated for the tremendous leadership they provide in our schools. And we know education is the key to a better future in Manitoba for all of our people, particularly young people. So it's a great day to be here to honor the early women pioneers of political leadership at the school board level. And we talk about it in the spirit of reconciliation. And I do want to acknowledge we're on the territory of the Treaty 1 people in the homeland of the Métis. And we know that with one of the people being recognized today, she's played a tremendous role in providing leadership to a northern school division. So we've got a tremendous range of leadership here today. And when we hear the bios and the historical record of their achievement, I can actually think back to the days I used to negotiate with INEZ Stevenson. And it was tough. Her son here among us today. So, you know, there's a lot of leadership that's been expressed here. And, you know, the journey started in 1916, the first in Canada to provide civil rights. But the journey continues as we deal with issues such as we're dealt with and still need to be dealt with, pay equity, issues of safety in communities, respect for people regardless. And women were among the trailblazers in that. And before I read the proclamation, I'm always reminded of one of the speeches that Martin Luther King gave when he was fighting for civil rights. He said, he was quoting somebody else even before him, the arc of moral history bends towards justice. That way. It doesn't bend automatically. There's nothing organic about that. It's the result of struggle and leadership and efforts on behalf of all the people of Manitoba, and women have been at the forefront of that at the school board level since 1890, more than 26 years before they actually were officially recognized to vote, which when you think about it, who voted for them? At the time, I think it was only people with property that had the right to vote, and very few women were the land title holders. So it was men that were electing women trustees, and even in those days, they recognized the leadership they provided to our communities. So with those very brief comments, thank you, Ken, for organizing this. I think it's very timely and important announcement. And the proclamation that we put together to honor this day is a proclamation on the Year of Women Trustees, and it reads as follows. Whereas 2016 marks the 100th anniversary of many women in Manitoba first gaining the right to vote in provincial elections, and whereas full democratic citizenship involves not just the right to cast a ballot, but also to participate completely in all aspects of the democratic process, including standing for and holding public office, and whereas school boards in Manitoba have been the local voice for delivering educational services to our youth since 1870, And whereas women have promoted and advanced public education in Manitoba by serving in the role of school board trustees since 1890, and whereas women trustees have broken social and cultural barriers and stood for public equality in Manitoba, and whereas Manitoba's women's trustees have achieved important firsts, including Rose Cherniak-Elkin, the first Jewish woman to hold political office in Canada as a trustee, Mary Antoinette Lemaire, the first Franco-Manitoban woman to serve in Manitoba, INEZ Stevenson, the first Afro-Caribbean woman to serve as trustee and hold political office in Manitoba, and Linda Ballantine, the first woman of First Nations ancestry to serve as school board chairperson in Manitoba. And whereas following the last school trustee elections in fall 2014, women have achieved majority standing in the trusteeship for the first time in our province's history of our schools. Now, therefore, let it be known that I, Greg Sellinger, Premier of Manitoba, do hereby proclaim that 2016 be designated as the Year of Women Trustees in Manitoba, and I commend its thoughtful observance to all citizens of our province. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those special words, Premier Sellinger. This coming July, our association will be hosting the National Trustees Gathering on Aboriginal Education, as well as the annual Congress of the Canadian School Boards Association. These two events will reunite trustees from coast to coast right here in Winnipeg. We will definitely showcase this important proclamation at all of our events during the rest of 2016. I would be remiss if I did not also draw everyone's attention to the presence in our audience of two additional and very distinguished are Miss Rana Bakari, leader of the Liberal Party of Manitoba, opposition critic for education with the Progressive Conservative Party of Manitoba. With the reading of the proclamation and these important introductions, I would like to formally announce the launch of the Manitoba School Boards Association's new website commemorating the 100th anniversary of women's right to vote. There you will be able to access the full proclamation that has been read by Premier Sellinger, as well as important statements from each of the Liberal and Progressive Conservative parties of Manitoba. On an occasion such as this, marking the important contributions of women trustees as pioneers along the road to voting rights and democratic participation, it is important to our association that many voices join with us in recognizing this anniversary as a milestone. Some of the most important voices that we encourage to join us are those of our women trustees themselves. To this end, we are pleased to announce the start of an important heritage project that will be accessible through the website. We would encourage all women trustees, as well as anyone who knows important stories relating to women trustees, to share their personal stories with us throughout the year via the website. The Honourable Nancy Allen, former Minister of Education and a past servant on school boards, has started off this important initiative by sharing several photos of her career from boardroom to Broadway. In particular, Nancy's story helps us to understand the strong role model that she had in her mother Hazel, who herself was an important contributor to equality for women in Manitoba. Hazel ran in the provincial elections of 1953 and 1958 and was a significant figure in paving the way for women to run for public office. It is stories such as these that we wish to tell for future generations of Manitobans, and also as inspiration for the next generation of women trustees. Please share your stories with us in the coming days, weeks, and months. Marking the contributions of our women trustees to the social, cultural, and public vitality of our communities is no easy task. There are so many different stories that could be told. When I look out in the audience, I see so many women who have played significant roles in our community as trustees and also beyond the boardroom. Nancy Allen, Maureen Hempel, Anita Neville, Carolyn Dumel, Ruth Ann Fergala, Yolande Dupuy, to name just a few. There are trustees who are here from every corner of the province. They continue to give of themselves in supporting the cause of a quality public education system for all, and we celebrate this today. That we are grateful for the roles played by our current trustees is, however, the result of a long heritage forged by so many. And so it is this that we wish to share with you today. That our province has become world famous as the home of folklorama goes without saying. Every Manitoban knows that with every introductory handshake comes a repertoire of our names, job titles, genealogical charts. We therefore take you on a journey through some of Manitoba's most important cultural firsts in order to share why we celebrate the role of women trustees in conjunction with the 100th anniversary of women's broad right to vote. I would now like to invite SAMUELLE, LEMOINE, a grade 11 student from COLLèGE RIEL, to tell the story of Manitoba's first Francophone women trustee.
Marie-Antoinette was the first Francophone woman school trustee in Manitoba. This is an account of her life and contributions to promoting education and equality of all women in her province, specifically in regards to French education. Marie-Antoinette Lamoureux est née à Saint-Lambert en 1886. Son père était d'origine française et sa mère provenait du Dakota du Nord, son père étant un pêtier qui faisait du commerce avec la compagnie de la baie du Thon. Marie-Antoinette fut instruite à l'école à Saint-François-de-Sales, où elle a appris le polonais avec ses camarades de classe, suivi par ses études au couvent des Sœurs Grises. En 1905, Marie-Antoinette compléta un an d'école normale à Saint-Boniface, où 30 de ses pairs étaient également francophones. À l'âge de 20 ans, Marie-Antoinette commença à enseigner à Saint-François-de-Sales, où elle avait charge de 52 élèves. Ses élèves étaient d'origine canadien-français, polonais, métis et anglais. Une chance que Marie-Antoinette était trilingue. Ce n'était pas un boulot facile et comme enseignante débutante, alla voir le directeur de l'école normale, M. Goulet. Par rapport au découragement de Marie-Antoinette, le directeur lui avait dit « Pauvre petite fille, t'as pas fini de pleurer si tu continues à enseigner. » Marie-Antoinette affirme qu'elle n'a plus jamais pleuré et qu'elle a continué à œuvrer dans les écoles de langue française. Elle est devenue directrice de l'école de Saint-Claude et œuvre dans les écoles jusqu'en 1917 lorsqu'elle épousa Paul Lemaire. À cette époque, les enseignants qui se mariaient devaient arrêter d'enseigner et devenaient mères de famille. Marie-Antoinette est donc devenue commissaire d'école et comme mère de famille, elle donna à ses enfants le goût de l'enseignement. Elle travailla comme commissaire d'école pour la division scolaire Parkman pendant 18 ans et elle fut secrétaire pour la division pendant 21 ans. Marie-Antoinette Lemaire hébergeait même les institutrices du lieu afin de savoir ce qui se passait dans les salles pour pouvoir discuter de sujets importants qu'elle tenait à cœur. Lors du décès de son mari, la vie de fermière et mère de famille prit fin. Marie-Antoinette retourna à l'enseignement à l'âge de 62 ans. Elle donna des cours jusqu'à l'âge de 84 ans. Notons que Marie-Antoinette Lemaire a pris charge de la première maternelle à l'école Précieux-Sang et y resta pendant une période de 15 ans. Elle fit partie de même groupe y inclut les femmes libérales de Saint-Boniface, chez les Dames de Sainte-Anne et elle fut présidente du local d'Angevin. Elle a reçu la médaille d'or de l'Association d'éducation des Canadiens français du Manitoba et un diplôme de membre honoraire à vie de la Fédération des associations de parents et maîtres de langue française du Manitoba. Et de grande importance, elle fut nommée membre à vie des commissaires d'école. Marie-Antoinette Lemaire s'éteint à l'âge de 97 ans. Une longue vie remplie de zèle, d'entrain et de grand amour pour l'éducation au Manitoba. En réfléchissant un peu sur la vie de Marie-Antoinette Lemaire, j'ai constaté que durant les années où elle œuvra comme commissaire scolaire au Manitoba, elle a dû avoir affronté des situations difficiles, car c'est à cette époque que les francophones n'avaient pas le droit de recevoir l'éducation à l'école en français. Les inspecteurs rentraient dans les salles de classe pour assurer que l'instruction se faisait en anglais seulement. Nous ne connaissons pas les enjeux et l'impact que Mme Lemaire a eu durant son séjour comme commissaire scolaire. Nous en savons seulement les résultats. Notre histoire au Manitoba nous rappelle que Marie-Antoinette Lemaire est née seulement un an après la fin de la rébellion de RIEL. Cet événement a eu un impact important sur l'avenir de notre province et même que cette dernière entraîne plusieurs interprétations. C'était avant tout une bataille pour conserver notre identité, notre langue et la préservation de notre façon de vivre. Même que la province du Manitoba a identifié l'anglais comme langue officielle, les francophones comme Marie-Antoinette Lemaire ont assuré que les gens qui sont ici depuis les débuts de la création de notre province ont pu être instruits en français dans divers systèmes scolaires et peuvent continuer à vivre leur héritage encore aujourd'hui. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Samuel. Thank you as well to Mireille Lemoine, Samuel's mother, as well as Mireille Kazadi, school counselor at Collège Louis Riel, who is joining Samuel in the audience today. It is a privilege for me to also welcome Madame Corinne Tellier, also in the audience, without whom the story of Marie-Antoinette Lemaire could not have been told. Joining us now to tell the important story of Rose Cherniak-Elkin is Sophie HERSHFIELD, a grade 12 student at the Grey Academy of Jewish Education. Sophie?
Rose Cherniak-Elkin came to Canada with her family in 1904 and became involved in many socialist Jewish groups like the Workmen's Circle School Committee and Jewish civic representatives. Rose taught at IR Parrott School, a socialist Yiddish school founded in 1914. In 1919, she was nominated to run as the Labour Party school trustee in Ward 5. She accepted the nomination and officially became the first Jewish woman to run for office in Canada. The civic elections of 1919 were very different than any elections that Winnipeg had ever seen before. Coming right after the Winnipeg General Strike, the elections were actually held during the same week of the trials of the strike leaders, many of whom were running for office. Rose's campaign was very difficult and challenging, as she was running against the incumbent, Max Steinkopf, a businessman and supporter of the school where Rose's father worked. Rose feared that her running would cause her father to lose her job, but she continued to work for the greater good. The campaign quickly became very contentious, and Rose was attacked by hostile anonymous letters and by aggression in the media. Her opponents called her a little wife and woman and tried to argue that she wasn't educated enough, didn't speak English well enough, and was too much of a socialist. Using the backdrop of the Russian Revolution and the general strike, her opponents tried to scare people by spreading the idea that if Rose was elected, Winnipeg school children would be educated as slaves of socialism. Because of this fierce opposition, Rose rarely spoke in public. But even while faced with all these challenges, Rose came out on top with a majority of 679 votes. Rose's incredible victory showed that despite the polarized political climate coming out of the general strike and the Russian Revolution, despite the stigma around socialism, and despite being brushed off as a woman who just wasn't good enough, if she stuck by her values, she could still come out victorious. Rose truly accomplished the impossible. She came as an immigrant from Eastern Europe with barely any knowledge of English, only a few years after women got the right to vote, and despite fierce opposition due to both her gender and political leanings, Rose became the first Jewish woman elected to public office. Because of trailblazers like Rose, I'm lucky to be in a position where my religion and gender don't hold me back from accomplishing my dreams. Rose stuck by her values of social justice and equality, and the Jewish idea of tikkun olam, repairing the world. And I know if Rose was here today in 2016, she would want to do everything in her power to help people who are held back because of their gender, sexuality, religion, race, or ability. The burden falls on us to work hard to repair the world as much as we can and give everyone a voice. Judaism has an idea of l'dor v'dor, from generation to generation. The ideas, morals, and values you share get passed down through every generation of Jews. Rose paved a path of hope for Jewish girls trying to get their voice heard. As a young Jewish girl in 2016, I look back at Rose's accomplishments, and I hope that I can exemplify her passion for social justice and helping others as I move forward in life. Because of the battle that Rose fought almost 100 years ago, young Jewish women like me today have nothing to fear when fighting for causes they believe in and speaking their ideas to the world. I'm so lucky to be here today, speaking freely and celebrating so many incredible and accomplished women. Thank you very much.
An incredible story, to say the least. Thank you for sharing with us, Sophie. I would also like to thank Tracy White, Principal, and Lori Binder, Head of the Gray Academy, for sharing Sophie with us today. Our next presenter comes to us fresh from writing her grade 12 provincial English exam just this morning. We wish her all the best. Nicole Rogowsky is finishing her studies at River East Collegiate and has been an active part of the Ukrainian community for many years. I would now like to invite Nicole to take the podium.
Honored guests, Manitoba School Boards Association. Good afternoon and dobry den. My name is Nicole Rogowsky, and I'm a grade 12 student at River East Collegiate, and I'm honored to be here today to speak to you about the life of Mary Dima, the first Ukrainian woman trustee in Manitoba. Mary Dima was born in 1899 in Ukraine. She was an orphan after World War I and came to Winnipeg in 1920 to live with her Aunt Joanna Westlake. She learned English at St. Mary's Academy and graduated from the University of Manitoba in 1923. She was the first woman of Ukrainian descent to graduate from a Canadian study in only 3 years. Mary taught at Stewartburn for a year and became principal at Ethelbert a year after. Her career in teaching was short as she married Dr. Bronislaw Dima in 1925. Women were not allowed to teach after marriage. She's a very inspirational woman and has helped women advance in society. She herself is a very strong and courageous woman. With the support of her husband and her 2 sons, Mary achieved many amazing things. Mary Dima ran and was elected for the Winnipeg School Board and served as a trustee from 1931 to 1935. She was one of the 4 women who ran in the 1936 provincial election. Mary was the first woman to run with a Ukrainian background for both trustee and as a provincial candidate. She was also president of the League of Women Voters. Mary was a very active lady in the Ukrainian community, and in 1929, she organized the Ukrainian Handicraft Guild, became a founding member of the Ukrainian Catholic Women's League of Canada, and in 1944 also became its first national president. She was a founding member of the first national president of the Ukrainian Canadian Women's Committee, being president from 1944 to 1946, 1951 to 1953, and 1961 to 1964. There's a chapter of the Imperial Order Daughters of the Empire established in her honor, as well as a scholarship dedicated to her achievements. In recognition of her outstanding contributions to her Ukrainian community, her church, and her country, Mary Dima received many honors recognitions, including the Centennial Medal in 1967 on the occasion of the 100th anniversary of Confederation of Canada, and she was granted a private audience with His Holiness Pope Pius XII. And in 1983, she attended the Papal Medal, or awarded the Papal Medal by Pope John Paul II. She was also recognized on a poster for Manitoba's Women Directorate, entitled Engendering Change, which recognized her many contributions to life in Manitoba. As a young woman of Ukrainian descent, I am so proud to be speaking about Mrs. Mary Dima, her achievements and her strong influence in Winnipeg and Canada's history. What an amazing accomplishment to be the very first Ukrainian woman to hold the office as a trustee. She inspires me and hopefully inspires many others to work for what they believe in and to be involved in many things to make it better for everyone. With January 28th of this year, 2016, being the 100th anniversary for the right to vote in Manitoba, it is important that we look back and remember these remarkable women, like Mrs. Mary Dima, who were strong and had the courage to fight for what was right. These women were amazing and inspirational. I cannot imagine the challenges Mary and other trailblazers experienced. Their accomplishments must continue, and we follow in their footsteps to achieve more. We also must not forget that these women have families as well. They raised children, cooked food, and cared for their families on top of all their other work. These women are passionate and brave and would not take no for an answer. As a young woman today, I cannot thank these women enough. They have shaped our society and made life for women better, and my life better. Mary Dima has helped not only women, but women in the Ukrainian community. And being founder of a member of groups such as the Ukrainian Catholic Women's League of Canada, her work has helped support women and also continues to do so. As Nellie McClung said, I'm a believer in women, in their ability to do things, and their influence and power. Women set the standards for the world, and it is for us, women in Canada, to set the standards high. I believe that Mary had the same drive as the woman in the famous 5. And just like I look up to Mary, she must have looked up to people like Nellie McClung. These women work together to help women, to help their children, and to help future generations. Our society today would not be like it is without the strong-willed woman. I am proud to have someone from Ukrainian descent with such a role, and makes me proud. A proud Ukrainian, a proud female, and a proud Canadian. Thank you very much. Дуже дякую to Mrs. Mary Dima and all the women like herself standing up for what they believed in and changing the rights of women one step at a time. Memory everlasting, Vichna pamyat, to her and all the women leaders in Manitoba. Thank you, Dyaku, for this opportunity to speak on an important subject in person.
The story of Mary Dima continues to live on quite vividly in Manitoba's Ukrainian-Canadian community today. We would like to thank Nicole for telling it, but thanks also to Susan Zook, Nicole's mother, for being with us today. Joining us as well is Vicki Adams, chairperson of the Mary Dima Scholarship Committee, an organization which has ensured that Mary's legacy has continued to live on. We would also like to thank Dennis Volkov of the Association of Manitoba Municipalities and Oksana Bondarchuk of the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress Manitoba chapter. Both Dennis and Oksana were instrumental in helping us to locate a proud Ukrainian-Canadian student such as Nicole for today's event. Thanks to each of you. The next story is very special for our association. Having once served in our association executive, INEZ Stevenson was the very first Afro-Caribbean woman to serve as a trustee in Manitoba, and was the first Black woman to be elected to public office in our province. INEZ was in fact the second Black woman to be elected anywhere in Canada, just 2 years after Rosemary Brown broke the color barrier in British Columbia by becoming the very first Black woman to be elected to public office. She was elected as member of the BC Legislature. INEZ was next, and we're very honored that she filled this important place in our national history as a school trustee in Manitoba. We're incredibly privileged to have with us today 9 members of INEZ's family. I would like to call upon 2 of her sons, Darryl, who is principal at NICOLE Stanley Knowles, and Bruce, who serves as a registered psychiatric nurse, to share their mother's important life and legacy with us. Darryl and Bruce, thank you so much for being with us today.
Greetings to the Premier, the Honorable Greg Salinger, Honorable Ministers, Manitoba School Boards Association, dignitaries, honored guests, trustees. On behalf of our family today, my brother Bruce, his wife Wanda, my brother Jim, his wife Yvette, our niece and nephew Jennifer and Pierre, my brother Gary, and my wife Sandy. It is indeed a privilege and a pleasure that our mother, along with Rose Cherniak-Elkin, Marie Antoinette Lemaire, Mary Dima, and Linda Ballantine are being honored as women of distinction. Women who have not only had an impact on their surrounding communities, but most importantly, on the lives of many, many Manitobans. In 1993, Pat Graham and I, as teachers at St. John's High School, collaborated with Zeba Loxley and Linda McDowell, one of Manitoba's pyramid historians, to publish The Black Experience in Manitoba, a collection of memories. The purpose of the project was to chronicleize the lives and history of Black Manitobans. Over 39 grade 9 students interviewed members of the Black community, 40 members indeed, some of them being Frances Atwell, Manitoba's first Black pharmacist, Monica Hearney, Winnipeg's first Black female police officer, and our mother, the first Black woman to serve as trustee in Manitoba, and also the first Black woman to hold public office in Manitoba. It was an incredible project. As a family, I don't think we understood the significance of our mother's accomplishments until she passed away at age 51. Our mother was very caring and often brought people to her home who were less fortunate than us, feeding them and giving them a place to stay. And that was no easy task, given that we were relatively poor and lived in boys. Bunu Marora, former president of the African Caribbean Association of Manitoba and member of the teaching staff at the College of Advanced Education Nigeria, stated, "Among the Black people of Manitoba, INEZ Stevenson occupied a singular position. She was her own public figure. Within her political landscape, her cause was the cause of the weak, the downtrodden, and the oppressed. Indeed, her mother had a significant impact on the Black community, and even today, people upon knowing that we're her sons will say, "I knew your mother." As a school trustee, she championed the right of students and helped establish breakfast programs in the inner city. She was a fighter for the less fortunate and an advocate for impoverished children. Harold Marshall, communications officer for the Winnipeg School Division, and a dear friend of my mother's, wrote, "People who are in public service of others are all too often taken for granted." In trustee INEZ Stevenson, the Winnipeg School Division and its community had a person whose devotion and dedication to the improvement of their condition was unquestioned. She saw it as her duty to serve a system which, in a state of constant change and being challenged to authenticate itself. She was dogged of will and determined of spirit to discover the ways and means by which the quality of life for everyone was made better than the way she found it. She was a stout defender of those who felt she had been discriminated against and would take to the offense to ensure that the right and privilege was safeguarded. A person of laughter, and indeed a person of humor, she loved the life she lived and gave of herself to those who needed her. She was selfless in her purpose to serve the Winnipeg School Division. In the truest sense, she was of the earth. And something my mother has instilled in me, it still resonates with me as an educator and now the principal of École Stanley Knowles, is that kids are first. And it's all about the kids. And we have to advocate for children and students to do what's best for them. On to my baby brother.
Sounds like a rap. On October 25th, 1981, around at midnight at our home, my father called me from another room because he was unable to wake my mother up. Unconscious but still breathing, I called the ambulance and my father went to the hospital. My brother Gary came home and I explained to him what had happened. My brother answered the phone, and by the moan in his voice, I knew that my mother had led this life. At her funeral, there were hundreds of people from all nationalities. At the time, I did not realize the influence and impact politically she had on not only the Black community, but in the community as a whole. It wasn't just about Mom taking care of 5 men, including her husband. They say that behind every good man there's a good woman, but in our house, behind that good woman, INEZ, there was a good man. My father received many messages and letters from different schools and divisions and associations that she had been a part of. As my brother had mentioned, from Bona Imaruma, who was director at the time of the Afro-Caribbean Association of Manitoba, she had wrote, about 1976, INEZ Stevenson joined ACAM. By that single act, she bridged the relationship spanned across Canada, the United States, Caribbean, and Africa, and in the process enabled ACAM to move one step nearer to its declared purpose. She accepted her lot and did her duty from a sense of honor. There is no meanness of spirit in her, no pettiness, no vindictive grudges. She played her part in the self-assurance that she was doing her best. Within her political landscape, she was a fighter, the happy warrior. Her cause was the cause of the weak, as my brother had said, the downtrodden and the oppressed. She never flagged in her services to them. You might disagree with INEZ, but you could never deny her integrity and her loyalty. I remember my mother telling me a story of a young girl who had fainted at school. And they took her to the nursing office and then to the doctor. And what they found out was that nothing was wrong with this girl, but she did not have breakfast in the morning. That was a cause for her to fight. Several weeks later, she was on CJOB Peter Warren, and I remember a man calling in and saying, "Why does my tax dollars have to pay for someone else's child to eat?" And her response was, "Sir, I understand, but the reality is that kids are going to school hungry and something has to be done. That opened the door for the breakfast program. I was at General School, and I came home one afternoon, because I usually came home for lunch. My mother asked me where I ate lunch. I said, I ate lunch at school in the science room. And she says, don't you guys have a lunchroom? I said, no, we usually gather for science room at lunchtime, and then we play sports in the afternoon. But that was another cause to fight for. For today, there is a new school for Gender Wolf. Maya Angelou said, I have learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did. But people will never forget how you made them feel. My mother loved a good fight for a worthy cause, especially if it involved those who were less fortunate. Because there is always a cost to caring, the reality is that people really, really don't care what you know. People really don't care what you know unless they know that you care. As a woman of African descent, my mother believed that it was possible to have a voice for a cause. And that voice should be heard. And that voice should not only be heard, but it has power to change and to bring hope to those that are in need. In closing, Lorna, in her tribute, made another statement to my mother. She said, what little was given her, she used to the fullest by creating her own opportunities. She was not afraid to stand up and be counted on in any public issue. Her life is a challenge to us, and no greater tribute could be paid to her than that we who are living might draw some lessons from her example. Again, on behalf of my brothers Jim, Gary, Dal, and I, we wish to thank Premier Selinger and the Manitoba School Board for recognizing and honoring my mother, INEZ Stevenson, today. Thank you.
Words cannot express our thanks to the two of you for sharing the memories and perspectives of your mother. There truly is no one else who could have done justice to telling the story of your mother and her achievements. In both of you, we see that Inez's legacy extends far beyond her special place in history. At the beginning of our celebrations, I mentioned that in an era of truth and reconciliation, it is important for all of us to remember. When studying the rich history of women trustees from a cultural and historical perspective, however, it can at times become difficult to do so. In Manitoba's long history as a province, it is certain that in the Aboriginal and Indigenous communities, there were many who came before, and yet remain unknown to us for these very reasons. Rendering things more difficult still is the reality that women in these communities did not achieve suffrage until only very recently, as mentioned in my opening remarks. We can be very confident, however, in the special recognition that we extend to our next honoree, were she not the first, Linda Ballantyne's service to her community for nearly 3 decades would still be deserving of our recognition on this 100th anniversary of women's roles in our democracy. That she is the first woman of First Nations ancestry to be elected to the position of school board chairperson, however, is undisputed. The important contributions she makes to public education across Manitoba are testament to the importance of ensuring that all members of our community are enfranchised, not only through the right to vote, but also through the democratic process. It is this important role that we celebrate with Linda, with her family, and with the entire board of the Frontier School Division who have joined us today. I am certain that in this respect, we are also joined by the community of Grand Rapids, where Linda was born and continues to serve as a trustee. Leading through the close of our reception today, AINSLEE DUCHARME, Linda's granddaughter, will come and say a special word in honor of her grandmother. At the close of AINSLEE's tribute, Victoria Blackbird, Chair of Rolling River School Board, and PEARSON Vice Chair of the Frontier School Board, will present Linda with the Star Blanket. The Star Blanket is our symbol of appreciation to Linda, confirming our association's respect and our community of trustees' admiration. We trust that this will be a source of pride and honor to Linda and her family in the years to come. The blanket was entirely hand-stitched in the traditional style by Gloria Great-Walker. Joining us today, we also have the Teenage Bears Drum Group of Maples Collegiate, led by Bernadette Smith and Sherry Denisuke-Pope. They will be performing an honor song for Linda during the presentation of the Star Blanket. These young drummers honored our association with their presence in October at our regional meeting in Winnipeg. I am happy that they are here to share their gifts and talents with us on this very special occasion. They are the evidence of everything that we strive for and hope will be recaptured through Manitoba's public education system. Without further ado, AINSLEE, we welcome you to come and share the story of your crew with us.
I'm Linda Ballantine. My mama grew up in Grand Rapids where she attended grade school. Through the home placement program, she was able to complete her high school and graduate from BLACKBIRD Collegiate. After pursuing some post-secondary options, RRC's Secretarial Science Program and U of M Faculty of Education, she decided that she wanted to work. She was hired at Grand Rapids School as a Penn student, and it was through the Penn program that she became a teacher. She was taught in Grand Rapids and in Barrows. After teaching for 8 years for Frontier School Division, she began working for Misapplied State Cree Nation, or then known as Grand Rapids First Nation, as Director of Education, a position she has held for the past 29 years. It was at that time she became a member of the Grand Rapids School Committee and soon after became a trustee. Linda received her 20-year service at the February 2007 School Committee Conference and has been a member of Grand Rapids School Committee for 28 years. In addition to serving on the school committee, she was elected to Frontier School Board, serving her first term from January 1991 to October 1993, and her second term from November 1995 to present. Linda has been married to Reginald for 34 years. They have 3 children, Reg, who's 25, Jessica, who's 29, and Monica, who's 35. 3 granddaughters, Ainsley, who's 15, Lily, who is 3, and Amanda, who is 1, and 2 grandsons, Terry, who is 4, and Ty, who is 1. When asked why she wanted to be on the school board, Linda stated that she believes that Frontier School Division is the best school division in Canada, and she believes in all the things that Frontier is trying to do, treat all staff fairly and equitably, that students in every school should have the same access and opportunity to quality education, and that parents must be informed and involved in their child's education.
Thank you. We will now do the presentation, but first I want to give you the name of the 2 songs that our teenage drummers are going to perform. The first one is the Chickadee and Judy Honor Song. The second one is the Women's Water Song. And with that, I will turn it over to Marion and Victoria for the presentation, and I would ask that you please rise during the presentation and the performance of the drummers. McDowell, local historian and researcher. Linda is a fountain of knowledge on the role of Manitoba's early women trustees, teachers, and suffragettes. For several decades, Linda has made it her singular objective to capture and record these women's important career and life stories. Without her important gathering and sharing of these stories, none of today would have been possible. Linda has been instrumental in helping us with the development and launch of our commemorative website. She has helped to bring us the stories that have been shared this afternoon. Without further ado, Linda.
Always been aware that being a trustee can be a difficult job. As you all know, whether you're a teacher or parent or trustee, they're the one group in our society who must juggle the needs and the wants of children, parents, taxpayers, school board members, other school board members, Department of Education, and everybody else you can imagine whoever went to school. So last fall, when I heard that women were now more than 50% of the members of the school boards in Manitoba, I became curious about who some of the first women were. As you may know, some property-owning women could vote and be run for school trustees as early as 1890 in this province. At the time that was put in place, I found an article from an Eastern newspaper that was really quite scathing. And do you know why? They were most concerned because in Manitoba, whenever we have extended the franchise to women, we have not distinguished between single women and married women. And the newspaper at the time said that a vote for married women was wasted because they had husbands to vote for them. All that I can say is they never knew my mother. So, when I started looking, the information wasn't easy to find. You know, when you go through local histories, you find the first school board perhaps. The rest of the time, you're lucky if you find the school board mentioned. We talk about all the trustees, all the counselors, all the kids, but not the trustees. So, as I began looking, I enlisted the help of Laura Rance of the Manitoba Cooperator, who put an article in saying I was looking for this information. And at that time, Josh Watt from the Trustees Association got in touch with me and said, you know, there's a possibility here. We could do something with this. So here we are. If you look on our website, you'll find that we have a lot of question marks. You may not yet find all the people you think who should be there. Please let us know if you have some other people we have missed. But some of the early trustees, we thought we would share a little information about them just to give you some idea. One of the earliest was a lady called Mary Speechley. We in Winnipeg know her because of Mary Speechley Hall at the University of Manitoba. In fact, she came to Manitoba as a university-educated English woman to meet her husband, who was the doctor in Little Pilot Mount. When Mary got there, Pilot Mount probably didn't know what hit it. She came as a trained photographer, and she was very early elected as a trustee, and away she went. One of the first things she did was to introduce home economics classes for girls. That was one of the early ones. We're not sure whether 1914 is the first that we can find. We will keep looking because we think there have to be some more earlier. The first woman trustee in Winnipeg was a lady called Elma Kennedy Brown. And she was a former teacher who gave of her volunteer time teaching English to refugees from Hungary at the time. So respected was she that the Hungarian government gave her an award. And even in the middle of all this, by the way, she managed to be a mother and also to write a book of poetry. You never knew what these women were likely to do. I would point out, by the way, that once women teachers got married, or as one of the old rule books said, any woman teacher who marries or engages in other unseemly activities, they were required to quit teaching and stay home. If you were really looking at giving women power, that was a mistake. If you had left women in the classroom, they probably wouldn't have had time or felt able to mix in politics. By letting them out again, these housewives felt it was time they had something to say. So you will find that many of the early women trustees had actually been teachers. If the men at the time had known, they probably should have left them in the classroom. It would have been less dangerous. Margaret Irwin was Brandon's first trustee. And the story is told that her nomination was signed by two men. One had cause to regret this. He lost his school board seat and she won it. I think we need to give special credit to the women of Icelandic background in this province. Whether we know it or not, when we're talking about Nellie McClung and other women who fought for the vote, the Icelandic women in this province have the oldest sustained suffrage activity group in the province. They started and they never let up. If you looked at the exhibit on Saturday at the archives, you would see petition after petition that was signed, or that were signed by Icelandic women. So it's important that in the 1920s, a lady called Christiana Thordarson was the first woman elected to Gimli School Board, but she certainly wasn't the last. She had been one of the very early suffrage workers in the province and still found time, her grandchildren said, to have the best after-school treats in town. So much for that. Gimli Board has had a number of women through the years, including some who served for a long time on the board. In 1921, in a tiny farming community of Manson, near the Saskatchewan border, I found on the school board list 2 women out of 5. Jean Potter Asselstein was one of those teachers who had decided to be a trustee, and another, Mrs. Vischer, we've lost track of because the family left. One of the reasons I mention this is that I noticed also when Fort LaBosse School Division was created, the person who represented that area again was a woman, and over the last years in Fort LaBosse, there have been at least 3 other women from that community. I'd like to know what it is that made that happen. There was also a Mrs. Macbeth, who was a Scotswoman, whose name in the paper always is followed by the quotation, a very successful agriculturalist, which of course was not expected of women. But she succeeded in running a farm very successfully after her husband died. And she and her son were both board members at Morgan School near Headingley. There are many, many more. There are lots of these women who have been forces in their community. And we know that some board members, like Nancy Allen, Maureen Hemphill, Linda McIntosh, have gone on to be ministers of education. Others have gone on, like Anita Neville, and others to be members of Parliament. And some of these other women who are board members in the province have stayed to work in their community. And some people who have been on the board for as long as 20. I guess the thing that I learned from this was the diversity of women who served. And I guess the other thing I've learned is that it's very important that if we respect the work that trustees do, and I mean men and women, we should record it. It's been badly recorded over the years, and it's increasingly hard to find. And a lot of those registers and things like that that were supposed to go to the archives wound up in somebody's garage. And sometimes we can get them and sometimes we can't. But altogether, I think we need to look at the women who became trustees here and how they changed and helped to make things work. The last thing I would say is that one of the things I always try to emphasize to my students is that the vote for women in Manitoba always came with support from the men in Manitoba. There was never a time that women came to the Legislative Assembly to ask for the vote that they were not supported by groups of men. So ours was not a hate men project. It never was. And in fact, most women would say that they had problems with certain politicians, perhaps, but not with men in general. So today, we celebrate